You're listening to Up1Notch, a podcast where I explore the tech business world. My name is Mohammad Aoun, and I'm a growth accelerator for tech companies looking to scale their businesses. I'm sitting down with software industry leaders, startup founders, and tech experts. Tune in to hear about the latest and greatest from the tech world. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for another episode of Up1Notch podcast, where we interview industry leaders from the tech space. Today, my guest is Tim Gentle, who's the founder of Think Digital. Hi, Tim. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really, really well, Mohammed.
Thank you so much for taking the time out. I know it's Labor Day today in Australia, but you still took the time.
Well, no one's here. Look.
Only the founder.
yeah, doing it for the team.
Awesome.
I'm really looking exciting for the podcast. Fire away, I'm all yours.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be asking about some questions about the agriculture, because I've worked in the tech space. I've worked with e-commerce brands. We understand what AR and VR and all of those immersive technologies do for e-commerce and all of those. But agriculture, that was new for me. So I just thought I would invite you on this show and actually just ask you a couple of questions about how does AR and VR can be leveraged in the field of agriculture, knowing that your company specializes and only works in the agriculture space through the use of AR and VR. So if you can talk a little bit more about its utilization there, how it can be leveraged, that would be a good starting point.
Well, that means I'd be giving away all my trade secrets, and then everyone would come to the agriculture market and take over. All right. Well, I'll share a few things just between you and I. Okay, we've got a deal.
Absolutely, and the subscribers, I would say.
Of course, I have no problem at all. All boats rise, Mohammed, in my opinion. Look, I guess one thing to do before we get started, I always like to ask a question of the people that interview me. And one thing I'd like to ask you, Mohammed, is what would you actually do if you won a bus?
If I own a bus?
Won a bus. What would you do if you won a bus? Have a little think about that. Even your subscribers should have a little think. What would you do if you won a big bus?
I mean, if with a bus, I would if it's some recreational vehicle, I would probably take it somewhere. If it was for, I don't know, is it for students to transport them from one to school to home or something like that?
Well, you can do whatever you want with it. I mean, the bus itself was a large coach, okay? So it's got the stairs that you climb up. It's got the luggage bays underneath. It sits 60 people. And there was a competition on Facebook, Mohammed, that said, what would you do if you won a bus? And you had to enter that competition. And in 25 words or less, you had to say what you would do with the bus. So there was all sorts of entries you could imagine, Mohammed. And I put an entry in, actually, and I said I would convert it into a classroom. And I would travel throughout Australia teaching people about the digital world. And what was ironic is 2 months later, I get a phone call and they say, hey, Tim, you've won the bus. And that was 8 years ago, Mohammed. And it's been quite a story ever since I had this massive bus under my name. Right now, it's at the Melbourne Agricultural Show and it's got 20 VR headsets on it. And so people climb up on board, they put on a headset, and then we take them to the farm to educate them about where their food is grown. So it's blossomed from winning a coach to now being a travel educational vehicle. So agriculture is the big thing, right? We have young little kids eating their lunch boxes in them, learning where their food comes from, all the way through to the farmer who produces the food. So I guess your question is, how do we use AR and VR in agriculture? And it stems right from the start, those young little kids. It's so important, I think, don't you, that kids should know where their food comes from? What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that's a very primary area of education that students should receive. How does food grow? How can its productivity be increased and things like that?
Well, a lot of young kids don't have an attachment to a farm like previous generations. A lot of them are city-based. They don't know how apples are grown. They don't know how beef is produced. They don't know how bread is made. They just go to the shop and buy it. Well, one of the things we do here at Think Digital is we use VR to educate kids how their food is grown. So we put on a headset and we beam them to a farm. They meet the farmer and they learn how lamb is produced. They learn how potatoes are grown. They learn how apples are picked and packed and taken to the supermarket. And we also use AR. So AR is augmented reality, and we use AR to tell digital stories as well. One of the things I love, I'll get a little prop. I've got a prop here for you. This little thing here, Mohammed, is a seed, seeds, and seeds. And so these are like a QR code. And when you hold your iPad up to it, you have to guess which seed produces which vegetable. And so we use these little tricky little things when educating kids, and it really engages them. They get a little bit bored with PowerPoints. They get a little bit bored with someone talking to them, but interacting with VR and AR, they love it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. That's a great, first of all, utilization of a bus to make it like a training, like a mobile training educational institute, and train them about how the farms work, how is the produce produced, and things like that. But that would, still fall something along the lines of, for example, the utilization of AR and VR in the field of educating students, right? So some people would call, okay, that's a educational utilization. But let me ask you this, like, how can AR and VR actually help improve the productivity of farmers, for example? Is there like an actual utilization of AR and VR to increase the productivity on the farms, like increase their crop production? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I would say that's where VR and AR is going. At the moment, it is a really good training tool. It is a really good marketing tool. But the challenge is, how do we use VR and AR to, as you said, make things more productive? Well, there's two parts. I think we need to talk, first of all, about labor, about the people that work on farms, not just the farmer, okay? There is a big labor shortage. And even when people are trained up, they don't actually understand as much as they think they know. So what we do is we've built out a large animal training simulator. So veterinarian schools at university, they put on a VR headset. So now we move into sort of like a VR environment, and they have to move the cattle around the yard. So they have to go and open up the gates. They have to break out cattle, and they have to sort of learn how cattle are moving. So this is not a 360 video. This is VR, and it's got some AI in it. So the actual bull knows where you are and you move from side to side. Then those veterinarian students go out into the real yard, and then they learn how to work with real animals. So it's a bit like a training simulator for veterinarian students. Again, though, Mohammed, that's still training and education, isn't it? So yeah. You've asked the big gold question: how do we actually grow more food? How do we do things like that? Well, one of the big things that's happening at the moment is all around spatial data. Have you started to talk about spatial computing? What's your analogy of spatial computing, Mohammed?
From my understanding, I know that, for example, satellites and all of those things, GPS data is definitely used to actually not just kind of find places like Google Maps and everything, but also kind of do location-based advertising. So I think all of that somehow, probably, I'm not sure if that exactly falls within spatial computing, but that's what I understand, like GPS and all of that stuff, yeah. Right?
Well, you said something really prominent there. So you said positional advertising. So based on where I'm standing, you can place an advertisement, right?
Correct.
Well, on farms, they have things called IoTs, the Internet of Things. And so something on a farm would be something like a soil sensor, or it could be a weather station, or it could be crop information from satellite imagery. In fact, they have animal tags that are GPSed. So when you put on a pair of glasses, AR glasses, this is known as the HoloLens. So you can see the difference here. You can actually see through that. Well, what we've been doing here at Think Digital is based on where I'm standing, I want to access all the data that's around me. Now, we don't need advertisements on farms, but what we do need is information on what the soil is, or where our cattle are, or is the gate open, or how full is the tank? What is the weather? Which way is the wind blowing? And so all this information you can make available in augmented reality. So that makes things more productive because I can access the data in situ. I don't have to go back to home to open up my computer, or I don't need to look down at my phone. I can keep my eyes on the road or on the motorbike and I can see the data. It's quite sci-fi, but it's very important. Now, the other thing we've been doing is digital twins. What's your little snapshot on a digital twin, Mohammed? What would you say a digital twin is for a farm?
I'm not sure about that.
What's a digital twin for a city then? Why don't we start there? What would you say a digital twin is for a city?
When you say digital twin, like for example, and like an actual physical twin, but how does that apply onto a city? I'm not sure about that.
Well, cities around the world, or factories or aeroplanes, they all are starting to have what's called a digital twin, a digital representation of what it is in the real world. So, for example, a city would know where the trains are, or if where all the water is, or a lot of utility companies use digital twins, right? So digital twin of a farm is so cool. What we've been doing now is we've been scanning a farm and creating a base plate or a 3D model. And then we overlay data on top of it. And then we bring up all of the IoTs. So you can have an augmented reality digital twin of a property right on your kitchen table. So often you have the agronomist who looks after the soil and the fertility of the land, and you could have the manager. And instead of looking at a computer screen or a phone, you can actually look at a hologram of a property. This is very important when you have investors in other countries. So we have a collaborative, which means multiplayer, augmented reality, which is almost like a hologram, digital twin of a property. So people can talk about it before they go out for the day, or investors can have a look at how their property is going. So that's pretty crazy too. So augmented reality is fantastic for seeing data in situ, and also for beaming out a little property or a big property normally as a digital twin.
So it's basically like creating that simulation environment to provide people the ability or the alternative way to actually train them, strategies about which areas need to be worked on and things like that. Like it's like when you say a digital twin, that's exactly like a simulated environment, providing them an alternative way to kind of get ready on how things should be done on the farm, for example.
Yeah, perfect. Especially when you overlay satellite imagery, you can see what parts of your farm isn't growing well. If you're planning on restructuring, and they call it farm planning, when you start to think, am I going to knock this fence down? Am I going to build a road? Am I going to put a channel or a river through here? So farm planning is fantastic as a 3D visualization. At the moment, a lot of people are still in 2D. They're on a computer screen. So what we're trying to do is get them out of the 2D world and to visualize it. It's almost looking like a little Lego city. But I think that's still a fair way away, Mohammed. I think we're still in a education training realm. And I think until these glasses are really useful outside, I think at the moment we can't use augmented reality as well as say we can use it in a factory. Because when you get out in the glare in the sun, sometimes you're on a motorbike and you got dust. Augmented reality really isn't ready yet for agriculture, but we're ready when we're ready to strike when these glasses become almost sunglasses.
Right. And definitely, obviously, it's going to take time. But let me ask you this: when you're working on farms, when you're working in, like, say, for example, the most remotest of the area, let's say in Australia or anywhere in the world, how how does internet connectivity play the role? Like, for example, when you're in the work role in a place where, let's say, there's very limited internet connectivity and all of those 5G, 4G, and all of those technologies are not really effective there. Does that really hinder for example, the training part? Does that if adversely affect how the people can leverage AR and VR there? And what's the solution to that? I mean, in cities it's understandable, but what about the rural areas?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mohammed. Look, Australia is vast, and we've got 30 million. You've probably got 30 million in your city. But, Australia is vast. We have problems with connectivity, although Starlink is really starting to make its ground down here. And so we are able to get connectivity out in the bush. But the big problem in the bush is not just connectivity. It's a big effort to leave your property and to come into town to be trained. And so there's a lot of opportunity now to do training on country. This is the government's really pushing that, where we can leave workers on their property so they don't have to spend a whole day to 2 days traveling to a location to learn how to do something. Recently, we were doing a biosecurity training. So biosecurity is massive in Australia. And so we're sending headsets out to the stations, and they're putting on headsets at the homestead, not out in the yards, but where they've got connectivity. And we're meeting up as multiplayer, as avatars in the Metaverse, and we're learning about biosecurity. So you can go that far. I think there is still a gap. I think once connectivity becomes better in the bush, we'll be able to be better out in the field. But at the moment, most of the training happens back in the homestead. But when you're dealing with the satellite, well, you can be anywhere. We don't need 4G coverage. So you can still find out where you are, but you can't sort of ping live data. So that's one of the downsides. It's a great question, but one of my favorite projects we're doing is working with Indigenous cattle stations. And they don't want to leave their country. They want to stay on country. They love it out there. So why do they have to come in to be trained when you can send a headset and they can plop it on? There's some beautiful projects we're doing there, Mohammed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, while we're talking about all of those headsets and farms, I was still trying to understand, do you notice the difference in perceptions? Like, for example, when you talk about as advanced technologies like, for example, Meta and Immersive technologies and AR and VR headsets and all of that, but you're going to the remotest and the most farthest areas of that are not really kind of very adaptive with the technologies and everything. Do you see a difference in the perception? For example, for myself, farming wasn't definitely the top industry where I thought AR and VR would be. That kind of held to the whole conversation that let's reach out to Tim. So do you notice the difference in perceptions of people when it comes to utilization of AR and VR in agriculture?
Well, again, I think VR and AR can play a role in changing the perception. That again falls back to what you said earlier. It's still an educational role that VR and AR plays. We've done some really important pieces in changing the perception of the Australian and beef and lamb industry. One of the projects we worked on, they used a immersive story or a 360-degree video, and they're using that particular story over in food expos throughout the world. So people put on headsets over in Dubai, over in Korea, over in the UK, and in fact, just recently in America, people want to know, do farmers care for their animals? Are they sustainable? What about carbon emissions? So you could tell a really good story in 360. I recently did one on a live export boat. So that's where the animals are alive and they travel from Australia over to Indonesia. And so people want to know, is that boat humane? What are they being fed? Are the animals being looked after? So again, it's an educational piece, Mohammed, but it's still critical in terms of changing the perception. Agtech, when I say the word agtech, do you know what I mean when I say that? Just in case
Education technology, right?
No, AG, it's my accent. Agtech.
Agriculture. Oh, agriculture technology, right?
Correct.
Agriculture technology, yes.
ag tech is changing the perception of agriculture as well. So drones and robotics and data, even behind me, you can see I've got a sort of a mural, and within farming, I'm pulling data and I'm placing information. So ag tech is really starting to make agriculture look cool again, which is wonderful. So that's attracting a lot of people into agriculture, but there isn't enough people to fill the jobs. We have a real labor shortage here in Australia, and we're constantly pulling people from overseas to come and work on farms or to work as a scientist. So instead of thinking about working for health or space or the army, maybe people who are studying robotics and coding can come and work in ag tech. That's one of the key messages we try to say.
Absolutely. So I think that's a very valid point, very, very important point, actually. When you speak, I think you spoke about two parts. One was the agriculture technology or ag tech, and then you also spoke about the labor shortage, right? When it comes to developing immersive technology solutions, like, for example, all of these awareness programs, or any other type of, for example, whether that's ag tech or just AR, VR solutions, how hard is it to find the talent in terms of, for example, software developers or different technical people that are required to develop these technologies to be able to appropriately support the agriculture industry?
I'm going to be honest, very hard.
Very hard. Okay. Like for example, normal software developers, like web application developers, mobile application developers. I mean, there's thousands of companies literally everywhere, but not a lot of companies still work on AR and VR. Not a lot of companies actually understand these technologies still and what they can do. Like when the drones came in, nobody understood that they would be kind of so extensively used to be kind of doing everything. I mean, I was looking at one video where I saw that basically in the farms, drones were being used to actually monitor the crops and actually find anomalies. For example, okay, the crops are not growing the right way, and things like that. And even like irrigation solutions were being developed and monitored through drones. Nobody understood that would happen.
Well, the drones scan a paddock and they identify different weeds, and then the robots come along based on the GPS locations of all the weeds, and then they spot spray. So the drones and the robots are now working together. That's pretty crazy. I mean, that's not AR or VR, but that's ag tech. So you're right. There is a lot of technology going into farms. But I just want to talk one more point. There's two parts to yours. So the first thing is VR at the moment, we're building out a virtual abattoir. That's like a meat processing. And so we're training up people in their own country before we bring them out to Australia. So VR has been an amazing tool for recruitment. And when they put on a headset over in Fiji or Tonga or wherever we're coming from, New Guinea, they put on a headset and they have a look around. Now, a meat processor can be quite confronting. And so it's a very good tool to demystify, you can see everything that you're going to work in. And some people say, no, this is not for me. So it's a great way to weed people out as well as to attract them. That's one of the things. Now, your question was around, help me out again. Could we just go back to what you were saying, Mohammed?
Yeah, no, we were just talking about, for example, the applications of, for example, when drones were invented, we never knew that they would be like monitoring water levels and irrigations across farms. Right? We never, at least I didn't understand that would be the application as well.
Correct, yeah. But you were also talking about the labor shortage of people that are in VR and AR.
Correct. Yes.
I want to talk on that point. So you asked me whether or not it was hard to find people. The answer is yes. I've chosen to build a small team onshore. I also have an offshore team that I use as well. But the biggest threat to our industry is the gaming industry or the movies. So a lot of people that are developing with Unity, which is a gaming engine, or Unreal, which is another gaming engine, they want to work in the industry of creating games. But we do attract a few of them to come and work for us. But I guess it's not as glamorous, so to speak, than building out a fantastic game or a Hollywood movie. So our biggest competitor is not just the talent, it's that other industries are more attractive to go and work in, I guess, in terms of doing things.
Bringing us back to the point of perception as well. We were talking about, for example, okay, AR and VR and agriculture. How do you connect the two? People don't. I mean, even on the not only on the farms, but people like, for example, on the tech side, people don't understand. Okay, what would be the point of developing a solution for agriculture through AR? And where people need that education and training on that side as well. But yeah, I mean, I understood that definitely there would be a lot of shortage of the right technical talent to be developing solutions for agriculture through AR and VR. But thank you so much, Tim, for taking the time for this podcast episode. It was very beneficial understanding how AR and VR can be leveraged specifically for agriculture and on the farms to train people, train farmers, kids, educating them about different technologies, and building better technical solutions to be able to increase the productivity of the farms.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we've got a few more surprises up our sleeves, so please get in contact with us. We're about to head over to France. We've got a brand new augmented reality application that we're launching, which will help combat foot and mouth disease worldwide. So we're about to launch that at the United Nations conference, and we're very excited to take our augmented wearable over there and to showcase how AR can help stop foot and mouth disease globally.
Awesome. That's very exciting. So give me a link and I'm going to put it in the description as well, and people can follow your journey, especially about that bus that helps people train on AR and VR. That's a great idea. Thank you so much, Tim, for your time.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks, Mohammed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.